it's completely thanks to YouTube and my followers on YouTube. I quit my day job in 2017 so that I can make a living out of this.
I'm sitting here with the artist Kebu, and he's currently on a European tour called the Synthesizer Legends Tour 2024. I went to see you yesterday in Helsingborg, and I could see that there's 12 keyboards on stage, and also 3 control devices, a drum pad, and a computer.
Yep.
How long does it take to set that up?
I usually always reserve 4 hours. In practice, we usually only get 3 hours. I always try to get 4 hours because we need the additional time, because sometimes there's always something that goes wrong, not with the setup but usually with the venue. Lately we've had like problems with the venues we'll be playing. A few of them were quite small, and we have quite a big lighting rig that we bring. We know that we have 30 concerts on the tour, and we know that some of the concerts are going to be on really small stages because I couldn't manage to get bigger ones, and then some of the concerts are on bigger stages, and then we need to be flexible. So my lighting engineer is really like MacGyver. He's really flexible, and he's really good at integrating the local lights of a venue into his own lighting rig. So what we the last few concerts, we had some problems with getting for instance, yesterday was in a small pub, and there was a lot of, he had to work like his ass off basically to get it to work there somehow. And so these are the challenges, and that's why we usually the actual keyboard rig yesterday was actually for me an easier day, because I got everything up already in 3 hours. We got some help with loading and load out from local fans, and it was much appreciated, and so for me it was quite an easy day yesterday, and I think it took me exactly 3 hours to set everything up, except for the keyboard rig. I'm also triggering the background visuals, so I have them connected to my sequencer, so when I start a new song, it also sends out a trigger to start the background visuals on my computer. And but that's the only thing I use the computer for. Everything else comes from the sequencer or from my hands.
So the setup for the venue, is that exactly the same like keyboard wise?
That's a good point. The keyboard rig is always the same, and that's sometimes I've had like I remember on some earlier tours I did have a couple of extra keyboards, and if I remember correctly, I think that was something like back in 2015 or 14. I used either like a pentagon style of setup, or I used a square. So that meant that for some songs, if I wanted to add some songs, I used the pentagon setup. But then I realized that it just became too difficult. And I mean, our van is already filled to the brim because my lighting engineer brings as much stuff as me. And then I just realized that I wanted to have I'm trying to streamline the setup all the time. So now I have a square which has only like 2 keyboards in the front. I used to have my previous tour, I had 3 keyboard rigs in the front. But on a high stage, I couldn't see the audience, so it didn't make sense. So then I was like, yeah, I really need to get rid of the 3rd keyboard. So I did a lot of work, and I have an Arturia Polybrute synth, which is my latest addition to the rig, and I've programmed 4 different synths, the sounds from 4 different synths into that one. Wow. So and that takes time, but nobody noticed it because it sounds the same because I've done a lot of work, so it sounds the same. So it's much this type of work that takes a lot of time for me, and it's stuff that nobody really noticed because it's not a new song. It's just I just tried to streamline some things, in the setup.
Yeah, I was curious about the lighting. Even the 4 screens in the background, is that your setup as well?
The screens that were in the background, that was the venue's own. Usually we tend to use the local displays. Sometimes, for instance, in Örebro they had a LED wall, and here in Helsingborg they had like four TV screens that were linked together, so it formed like one big background screen. And those were great, so we used those. We have like a backup windows, so we have two I think it was 65-inch televisions that we can put on lighting stands, and those we use in places that don't have a projector or don't have any form of LED walls or displays. Because the background screens are anyway quite important because I have the background visuals on them. So that's usually how we run it.
Yeah, I was curious about the screens because I was thinking like they were fitting like 4 screens exactly for the stage, and I'm like, I was just curious about the lighting, and I'm like, did it bring? I mean, you have the graphics, so like, did they bring those screens matching that exactly? But now I understand where you come from. So you actually have a backup for 2 screens as well, and then, but you want to use the venue setup most.
It's fast.
Yeah. So there's no problem with connecting this computer to whatever setup they have.
Yeah, there are problems, and it's really random. So like most problems so far has come from trying to connect the screens, the local screens. But here in Sweden, it's been really smooth so far. Everything it was really weird as well because I played before in Örebro and at the same venue. And last time, 2 years ago, I had huge problems of getting it to work. I can't remember what it was. I think it was something to do with the scaling because the LED walls you have a different native resolution. And then you need to scale it on the visual software I'm using. I didn't know how to do that, but now I've learned. So I was like, okay, now I'm prepared. And then I came to Örebro and I plugged it in and said, okay, let's see how much work this is going to be this time. And it was like, it worked right away, and didn't have to do the scaling. I don't know what happened. I asked the venue owner, have you changed something here? And it was, no, it's exactly the same as last time. I was like, okay, it works. Let's forget about it and continue. So but sometimes it can be like really tricky because sometimes there might be another band I really try to avoid that, or DJ or whatever, that also wants to use visuals, and sometimes the venue only has like one HDMI input, and I'm just using an ordinary old Dell laptop computer, so with Windows. So if you unplug it, then you have to make the settings again, and it looks really unprofessional if you would have to do that when the audience is there. So then I always demand that I need to have the screen all the time connected. But now again, it was they did sound, and they realized that during they sound checked the other band after me. So then all of a sudden they had disconnected my screen. I was really nervous backstage that what's going to happen. And then I noticed that like 50 minutes before the show, then they put the screen on, and it was as I expected. It showed only the desktop background. Fortunately, I put the desktop background is the cover art from my Synthesizer Legend album, so it works. It looks like perhaps it was on purpose. So then I just had to put my hoodie on, black hoodie on, and go on stage and fix the routing again. So or the display. But unfortunately, it was quite quick. I just had to disconnect from my visual software and reconnect, and then it worked. So.
Yeah, I saw you coming in with the hoodie. And I was like,
right.
yeah, he's hiding.
Yeah. That was the reason.
The graphics on the screen are amazing. How does the process to getting graphics together with your show?
So some of the graphics I made myself. Some of it is quite a large part of it. I probably would say that most part of it is stock footage. So basically, just I've purchased licenses for different type of stock footage videos, stock videos I think you call them, and then I just edited them together to fit the music. And in some cases we used I had a contact with a VJ who was or actually a software developer who was also like a VJ as a hobby, and he made a program called Set Vector, and this program takes a depth camera as an input, and then it uses that depth camera input for generating graphics. So you can see in some of the background videos, you can see me performing in kind of a pixelated style, and that's the depth camera that I have recorded previously and used that then together with the Set Vector software, which is a VJ software that takes that data as an input, and then made graphics out of that.
Wow.
Kind of in real, and it works in real time because it's like you make you can't program the graphics. You have to kind of work on them in real time and adjust the sliders and stuff that makes things go like different. ways
awesome.
in real time. Yeah, so it's that was quite it was fun to do, but it was a bit tedious. I would like to do more with that to have more of the same style, but I just hadn't had time to set up the depth camera and start generating those graphics or like, you know, so yeah, I would like to do more with that. But now I'm not sure if they're supporting the software even any further, so let's see how it goes.
The tour is called Synthesizer Legends. We all love your covers, but also your original music. How do you treat the covers? As a way to get your music out? Or would you still play covers if you could fill a whole arena playing your own music?
That's a good question. It was the ideas with the cover came, I have to think back. I think it came actually already around my third video or something, and I think it was the third or fourth video was a cover. And then I had this idea that I just wanted to try to find to get more viewers basically, just by doing a famous cover. Then perhaps somebody else will find my music that wasn't aware of it before. And then later on, I've always enjoyed when I played in a lot of rock bands and other bands, I've always enjoyed doing covers live because usually people don't know your music if you're a hobby band. And then if you perform a cover, then people recognize it and go crazy, sort of. And so I always I enjoyed playing covers. Probably that was part of it, and part of it was that I felt it was fun to do an arrangement of an existing cover and make it perhaps a bit different. So that's how it started out, and I think. It's a good question. That would I still do covers if my music became really popular? I probably would do. Probably because people expect to hear some covers from me on each gig by now. So I think it's kind of become. I probably would have a difficult time to completely remove the covers from. I have to see about that. It's an interesting question. I haven't thought that far. I'm usually right now. I'm just focusing on getting alive out of this tour, coming back in one piece. Yes. That's my main goal for the moment. Yes. So yeah, well, it's an interesting question, and I don't have a real answer for that.
I'm thinking the same, because when I do the covers as well, a lot of people are asking me that I don't actually compose my own music. I do a lot of covers, and everybody's like, can't you play something by yourself, like your own music? So I have a demand of people want me to play something of my own in my style, because I have the way of me playing the covers like you do. And I think you can do either way now, because I heard the response of the audience and me as well. Yeah. When you play your music, it's like, oh, it's that song. So it's in that level now that you can decide either way. So my question is more like, what for you as a person?
You can actually elaborate on that, and the reason with this album that I put out, the Synthesizer Legends album, was that I did my covers became quite popular. I have several covers actually on YouTube. The reason why I made this album was that I already made my first cover in like 13 or 12 years ago. And people was asking for this. Do you have a studio version of this cover? And I said, no, I don't have. And then already when I made my first album, I was thinking about including some covers. But then I just realized that actually the covers I now have, they are in such a different style for this album, so it wouldn't fit on the album. And I thought, okay, I put it on the next album. And then came Perplex, and I was like, no, I can't put any covers on this one either, because they don't fit the theme of the album. And then came Urban Dreams. Same thing, no, I can't put anything here. But actually already by Urban Dreams, I had already decided I won't try to fit any covers on my albums. I'll just make a cover album instead, because by then I had so many covers, so I thought, okay, it would be a fun idea to just do a cover album. I think that would make more sense. And then when I started working on the Synthesizer Legends album, I realized that, well, I can't fit all, or I could fit all covers on one album. But then I thought that, wait a minute, why don't I make it like a theme and take like 5 of my existing covers and then make perhaps as many new ones. And that's what I did. And then I got like quite a nice like 80s retro album together that has really like a clear focus. and that's when the idea came up as well. But okay, now I still have some songs that I didn't put on that album. So then I thought that okay, why don't I make at least a volume 2 at some point as well? So it's like volume 1 and volume 2 will definitely come at some point in time, but it will probably take some time, because right now I feel like I really would like to continue making my own music, and especially because also my fans really seem to like the music, and they start to recognize it. So it was really fun. It was actually here in Helsingborg that people were the first time I hear that people are singing along with my instrumental tunes. So that was really amazing. So yeah. Now right now I'm looking forward to making more of my own songs.
Yeah, I was very amazed by that. To be part of singing along with you yesterday it was amazing. It was really cool. It was awesome. Good, yeah. It was awesome. We felt the same thing as you did, and
right.
We were like, "Oh my God, this is so awesome!" So you and I were both born in the 70s, and with computers like Commodore 64 and Amiga emerging in the 80s. I ended up being a computer nerd who loves music, and resulted in that I love playing video game music live now. I'm curious if video games and computers has been a part of your musical journey too?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, because it was I think the reason is my parents, because they forbid me to have a Commodore 64 at that time, or MSX when those came out. MSX was quite popular as well in Finland, and they said that, look, we're not going to buy your computer because you would sit in front of it all the time, which was correct. So I got my first computer when I was 14. And that was an Atari ST, which was of course famous for making music. But the problem was the music software was so expensive, and of course you would have needed then it had a built-in MIDI in and MIDI out, but I didn't have a synthesizer at that time. I didn't know how it would work even. I think it was around that time that I the first time saw a MIDI studio. It was actually my piano teacher who showed me his MIDI studio, which was based around a few keyboards, and I think it was a Mac or something like that. And I was really amazed by that. Wow, you can do this, and of course I was really intrigued by that. But at that time they were just so expensive for me, and my parents weren't rich either. So it was really like just something, kind of a dream to sometimes have. And I had friends that had these computers who played games there, and I was really amazed by the music because it was so different. And I realized also the kind of the technical or the challenge perhaps in making with such restricted technology to make music, but I really realized that this is something really unique, because there's sounds that I never heard before, and that probably I think the game music did have an influence on me becoming interested in making music with technology. So definitely it had an influence on me, but and there were also in the 80s or of course also due to that restriction in the computers, the music tended to be really like melodic and had a lot of harmonies and stuff in it, and a lot of interesting things happening. Just because it had to be interesting music in order for it to be interesting. But it was also the 80s, and the 80s had more melodic music in general. So I think all that of course affected me, but not like computer music didn't have like a single major impact on me, but it had an effect, of course.
Finland, they have the assembly party, and I know you play there as well.
Yeah.
How did you end up playing there?
I think I was contacted by them because I probably wouldn't have had the guts to contact such a big festival and ask to play there. I think they must have contacted me. I think the one who was the head of the festival was a fan of my music, or had found out about me, and then thought that, well, we have to get this guy here. So that must have been the way. And then after that I played. I think I played in total 3 times at the assembly party, and then I also was invited to perform at the Gathering, which is a similar festival in Norway. And there I actually met a VJ who who helped me make the first background videos. So I think probably a fourth of the videos you saw yesterday are still the ones that he made. So Jörgen Ellefsen, I have to point out. So he was the one kind of who introduced me to background videos and visuals. So that was an interesting experience, especially at the Gathering Festival. We had like a circle-formed screen on top of me. It was a bit Pink Floydish, and then they had around the keyboard the rig. They also had a bit like LED walls, and it really looked amazing.
Cool. The assembly was in 2013.
Yeah.
And for how long have you been doing music? I mean, you released your first CDs here in the 2000s.
Actually, my solo albums, the first solo album came out in 2012. But before that, I was part in many hobby rock, soul, funk bands, and I played with probably 20 different bands. But then at some point, I was in a quite a band that demanded a lot of work. And we worked really hard and long on one album, and at that point I really became like perhaps frustrated with it, and then I got the idea just to try to do some synthesizer music on my own, which I hadn't done like when I was like 20 in the early 2000s. I did some demos, demo CDs of synth music where I sang, but it was more a bit industrial influenced. But anyway, like melodic synth. But that I left that. I didn't have time for that then, and then because I played in so many different bands, I was studying and then started working and then. But then in 2010, I think it was, when during this tough album process, I just tried to make an instrumental synthesizer music and realized that I seemed to have a knack for it. And then I decided it was around the time that YouTube actually became popular. And then I thought that why wouldn't I? Because in high school I was the producer of a movie that we made for the Christmas party at the high school, and we made like an action action movie, almost an hour-long action movie, and so I had some experience with editing, of course with VHS tapes back then. And then I thought that would be fun to do now when YouTube had become like a phenomenon. Then I thought like and I had got a camera that had some simple video recording capabilities. I thought that, hey, let's try this thing. I did a synth song and then I put it out on YouTube, and that was it. Then I started to get like a lot of I got great comments. Already back then I knew that you can get quite negative comments as well, but it was really great comments, and that encouraged me to continue.
The start was actually you getting recognized on YouTube.
Yes. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. It was just because it was like I got so overwhelmingly positive comments on YouTube, so it encouraged me to make more music and make more videos. And so everything I released up until 2012, so let's say the year before that, was just like demos that I put out on YouTube, and they became really popular. And I realized, wait, I start to have so many songs now that I actually could do a solo album. So then I did a solo album, my videos became more and more popular, and then people started to buy my album as well. And that's on the way where that it just built from there, and it's completely thanks to YouTube and my followers on YouTube. So yeah, that's the way I and then I just quit in bands one after another until I eventually quit my day job in 2017. But I got I had applied for, and I got an art grant for doing music for 1 year professionally. But then the criteria was that you can't you can't have a daytime job at the same time. You have to have a complete time off for doing this. And then I asked I was working at a technology research center in Finland at that time, and I asked my boss if can I do this thing, and they said, unfortunately you can only take like half a year off. And I actually had applied for that art grant already like many times before that, but now I think this was the first time I applied for it with my own music, and by that time I already had released my first album, and I had gained a following on YouTube. So then I was kind of I had although I didn't have a formal education, I had proof to show that I actually have something going here, and could really use an art grant for a year and do something good with it. So yeah, so I took the art grant and I decided to quit my job because my boss said, "Look, you can apply for a job back in a year. You will most certainly you will get it back." But I just I just realized that I didn't. I still probably haven't done everything I wanted to have done in that first year. I managed to survive quite well somehow as well, and I got in additional art grants. So now it feels like now this year it starts that now I actually can make a living out of it.
Is the touring part of it, of you making music, or is that just the thing that you have to do when making music?
Because it takes such a lot of work for me, basically it takes half a year. I can't make any new music during that time. So the reason I do it is partly because it generates an income, especially if you can build it big enough. I mean, if you what I realized is the more I perform in one city, the better I get ticket sales there. So I can see now already a trend that in the cities where I performed before, I have higher ticket sales than in other cities where I haven't performed before. So in a way, it's touring. It's really like right now I feel like I reached the peak of YouTube. For me, I feel like I had I think I had 1.5 million views in its peak around 2018, and now per month. And now I'm down in half of that, 750,000 views per month, and you can't really make a living out of that. It's not enough money. So touring becomes important that in that sense that in the long run, if I can build, if I can become more popular and gain bigger audiences, then the touring is definitely where a large part of the income lies, so that I can make a living out of this. But it's also because of my fans. I think the thing I do is best live. Many people say that it's much better live than on the albums. Of course, because the way I do it, I'm performing everything live. There is no backing tracks. I have a sequencer that controls the synths I'm not playing, but all the sounds are generated there on stage by analog synths and analog drum machines. So I think that experience is really important. It makes the audience senses an excitement that there is so much that can go wrong. So it's a bit like with a traditional performer, how can he play this, and will he play a wrong note on the piano or something like this, and so there's a sense of excitement that you probably won't have if you have a DJ there. Of course, he can also screw up easily, but still, that's just the music comes from a CD or vinyl or a laptop, so it's not at all the same excitement, and yeah, so touring is definitely part of this, and what I also realized that when I just sit in the studio, it's really weird. It's such a big contrast to I've been kind of alone now for half a year at least, and completely isolated in the studio, and then all of a sudden I'm meeting like 200 new people per day. So it's really weird, but I am a social person, so I actually enjoy it, and I get like energy out of it. I've actually only slept like think between 4 to 6 hours per night now, but I still feel kind of like energized still. Probably not in a few weeks, but right now at least. And I think that energy comes from other people, being around other people, and the massive response I'm getting, and positive response, and also then I sometimes I feel like the previous job I did was much more important because it had to do with developing environmental friendly energy technologies. But then at some point I realized that kind of perhaps first during the last year I realized that actually my music and my live shows brings a lot of joy to people. So then I'm kind of thinking of myself now like an ambassador of joy, or something like, just like an entertainer, just somebody who brings a good feeling to people. So I'm also kind of sensitive. So if something goes bad, then I get angry. So, but I'm trying to keep that in mind all the time. I'm here for the fans and not for the venue or whatever, whatever goes wrong at the venue. So and the fans don't necessarily know about that unless they read it from my expression. So then I just try to focus on being nice toward my fans and yeah. To kind of, I think that's the most important thing that I'm doing right now. I'm bringing joy to people, so I'm trying to stick to that and really make sure that people have a good time at my concerts.
It's very interesting because we have the same experience in that sense. The way of thinking, like being an artist, is like entertaining people, but you need to entertain people. People need this as well.
Yeah.
People need to have a job, but they need to go and relax, and you need to do this for them.
It's true.
And the same thing with playing wrong. My audience, when I play live, they enjoy me playing live because it can go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that expectation that my audience don't care if I just play wrong or if I try to play another song in the middle of the thing. They really enjoy it, and they enjoy me being there and doing the thing.
No, I can imagine that.
And I also told the other artists that play music that are in the same phase like I am, it's like when you play live, don't be angry if you do wrong. Nobody, they don't see it. No. If you just laugh it off and have fun instead. Yeah. And some of the guys that I talked about this, they're like, but that's they're feeling like it's a sense of I made a mistake.
Right.
Now everybody's going to be irritated and annoyed. They will forget about it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to just have fun instead and just don't care about the errors. The same thing that I do on YouTube. If I go live, people enjoy me being me and doing stuff just doing it instead of thinking like it should be perfect, because that will be totally stiff.
It's true.
It's probably like this interview as well, me being just not knowing what I'm doing. So when did you start playing music, and when did you realize that was a thing in your life?
I think I always enjoyed listening to my dad's cassette tapes and music in general, and I guess my parents noticed that I liked music as a kid, and then I had my dad's aunt used to be a teacher in the small village where I grew up, and she had a piano. So at her, always when we visited her, then I played at her piano, and she taught me how to. Pressed a few keys, and she had a what is it called? A lead pencil, and she wrote the names of the different keys on the keys. And that was my really first kind of education with music. And then later, when I was perhaps 7, 8, then there started to be there was a piano teacher who came once a week to the school where I went, and in the evenings then held like courses. And then I went to his course, and that was the way that I started to learn piano. So I worked with him for 3 years, like once a week then. But then he said that, look, at this stage, you really need to you need to go to a bigger town and start a music education there. But then that was 40 kilometers away. My parents said, we can't afford to drive you there like 3 times a week. And personally, also, I was a bit scared to go to a big town and started to do that. It felt a bit overwhelming because it was a big town, 10,000 people or something. And but I grew up in a village with a couple of hundred of persons. So yeah, so that. But so I wasn't that into it, and my parents weren't either into it. So then it kind of died out. And then I started to play guitar because my cousin played guitar as well. But then in high school, I realized that I had a knack for keyboard playing anyway. I was better at keyboard than the guitar. It felt more natural to me. And then I became interested around that time as well in synthesizers, and thought that, well, why wouldn't I play keyboards in a band? Because I realized then when in high school, then I started to my peers were in bands, my classmates were in bands, and I was like, bands is a thing, all right, yeah. And then I realized that there was usually a lack of keyboard players in bands. So I was like, okay, why wouldn't I start playing keyboards then? Because anyway, keyboards is, I mean, a piano is the thing I grew up with, basically. And that's where it started, basically. And I have some, in high school, I took some formal courses, just to have, like, I thought that, well, just to cover my grounds. So let's get the basic courses, rid of the basic courses. So then I eventually, when I was 18, I did the courses that my piano teacher told me to take when I was a kid. Oh. But then I kind of quickly I just jumped directly to the the kind of the final courses, and in 1 year then I trained piano and then took the theory courses. So I got like a really basic. So I have some basic courses that I've taken that I can put on my CV. And so that was good. I did, because then I especially when applying for the art grant, I could show them that I do have some basic education in this, in music. So that was nice. And
what instruments do you play?
Well, keyboards, of course, but then I know some guitar, and I have a bouzouki as well, an Irish bouzouki, which is like 8 strings, and I play a bit on that as well, but really not much. And that's basically the only. Okay, I have a bass guitar as well. I can play some really basic bass. But that's about it. I did do some practicing on drums once in university, but that died out quite quickly. Just didn't have time for it, I guess. I tried a violin, but I sold it quite quickly. Because I didn't have a knack for that, and I realized, for playing a violin good, you really need to put time into it. I was like, okay, so I stuck to keyboards.
What I've seen is that you do all the music with your keyboards and real hardware. Do you have any issue with DAWs and software synth, or is it just that you like the way of doing it?
Yeah.
Or
no, I don't have any issues with software synths, not digital synths either. It started out around the time when I started to work on my first album and they made the first songs. I was in a band that was called Vinyl Jam, and they had this idea of doing everything using analog equipment. So like we recorded onto tapes using analog mixers, and it was a nice experience, because I realized that analog is much more forgiving. Mixing analog and recording analog is much more forgiving than mixing digitally. Especially back then, it was digital wasn't that evolved yet. So you really could tell a difference between the way of recording, and also it meant that the whole band had to practice the songs before we went into the record studio, like we did it really like traditionally. So then we recorded the whole band together. The only thing we overdubbed were solos. And so that was a fun experience. And then I thought that why don't I elaborate on that a bit? And what about if I would make this first album using only analog synthesizer, analog drum machines? Because with this band, then I had already started to collect a bit of analog keyboards and synthesizers, and got interested into that. And as an interesting side note, in that band I played a clavinet, which is like a stringed. It's a keyboard that has strings inside, and that's really, I felt that was my instrument, because that's really we speak about some electromechanical instrument. That's really my thing. It's even like more my thing than the piano.
It is. It's an amazing sound.
It is. Yeah, I really love it too. So anyway, and it's kind of a combination of a guitar and keyboards. So that was like, that's for me. And anyway, that's the reason I started to do only with analog synths, and also because back then I just had like a small analog mixer, and I had a few analog synthesizers. So it was also it made a really interesting challenge, and it motivated me a lot to do. It was like, oh, how far can I push the limits? Because around that time the software synthesizers started to be so good. So it was like, was like you can actually do anything with DAWs and software synthesizers these days. So it was like usually I was used to work with restrictions. So it was like, because my style of music, I have a very broad style of music taste. So it was like when I only worked with analog synthesizers, it felt like the style of music I did tended to just like go in one direction. So it really made like a nice canvas and palette to work with, and that really motivated me. So then I stuck to that, and then it just went further, like, oh wow, I can do this with only analog synths and drum machines as well. So I still haven't found a reason for going digital, or and of course not use software synths. Also is like I don't see any need to use them right now, because I already have kind of I've put so many years already into this and developing these techniques, so it feels like I want to go further with this. But I'm not saying that I'm never going to use digital synths. I already have an album in mind that I would like to do that involves digital synths. But yeah, for live use, I probably only will do it this way.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because when we're talking about the Commodore Amiga and the C64, it all had the limitations.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about the limitations. Like
right,
that brings out the thing
yeah.
that you do good stuff with the limits.
Yeah.
The same with my keyboard. Instead of me using a DAW as well, I'm just sitting by my keyboard. I don't have to find instruments or anything like that. I just go around in my keyboard and try to configure the sounds and do things. And then like, oh, I like this. And when I record it, I have to record it into the computer digitally. But I will just record everything that I do like a WAV file.
Right.
Like each track will be a separate WAV file, and I will adjust the volume afterwards. But everything comes from a keyboard, so I recognize totally what you're saying, and it's so fun to just do with the limitations.
Yes, to work with the limitations. Because
you get lost when you work with when there are so many limitless options, and it takes time to learn them anyway, and like explore them. So yeah, definitely. I mean, really, and but I'm already kind of making life difficult for myself, because I when I worked at my previous job, I got so quite well paid, and then I started collecting even more analog synthesizers. And then at some point I realized that I have too many. There are many of them that I still haven't learned like fully, and just using like scratching the surface of them. So yeah, I really would like to go more in depth to just like using a few synths and explore those again.
Speaking about keyboards, which keyboard was your first real synth that you had?
My first real synth was a Kawai KA12, which was a digital vector synth, and at that time I was playing in Rock Band, so I bought a completely wrong synthesizer. So I hated it, because it was like I can't get any decent piano sound out of it, I can't get any Hammond organ type of sound, and I was like, this is hopeless. Then I realized at that point I was like, okay, I knew already that there are so different types of guitars, and then I realized that actually synthesizers are like different instruments from one to another, and you really have to learn them. So that's kind of how I got into starting. I started to buy. I realized the only way, especially back in those days when there was no YouTube or anything, the only thing you could, the only way to gather information was kind of reading books and reading kind of brochures about different synths, and trying to figure out what they can do by reading these brochures. I couldn't even hear them unless you went to a music store and tested them. So then I started to buy and sell used synths as a hobby. So on the side, so I just basically what I did was that, and I sold the Kawai away, and then I used that money and started to buy instead used synthesizer, and started to kind of I think or really like follow the market. So then I was like, oh, this is quite cheap. This is usually not that cheap. I go and buy that one. So I bought it, and then perhaps I sold it away half a year, or a few years later, and got a bit more money out of it. And then I had saved some more money as well, and then I could buy like perhaps 2 used synths instead. And that's the way it progressed too. I probably have owned over 150 different synths, right?
How many do you have now?
Now I guess I have around 50. I haven't calculated, to be honest. It can be more than 50. I haven't calculated.
So we reached the end of this interview, and After this tour now, what happens? Is it like a vacation, or you just go in to write new music, or do you just restart everything and planning a new tour again?
It's actually all three of those. So
Yes.
first I'm going to have a 2 months long vacation. It's going to be really well deserved. And then I have a project which kind of I had to leave in the middle that I actually got art funding for. But I had to leave it in the middle because the tour came and I realized actually this tour is going to take all my time now for the next half year, which it has taken as well. And so I will continue with that project, and then I'm already in the process of starting to plan the next tour, because it won't happen until 2 years, but the planning already starts.
Yeah.
So all of those things, but definitely the focus will be after my vacation on making new music.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Tusen tack ska ni ha. Tusen tack Helsingborg. Erinrar om att Brasilien är här med 20. Tusen tack ska ni ha. Vi ses igen om ett par år. Tusen tack.